today's educational webinar with Cancer Support Community Los Angeles. I'm Abby Espinoza, the Program Coordinator at CSCLA, and I'm honored to welcome you to this week's webinar titled Education and Employment for Young Adults Living with Cancer. Before we begin, if this is your first time joining us, Cancer Support Community Los Angeles is a premier nonprofit organization providing vital social and emotional support to families facing cancer, including patients, caregivers, and their loved ones, all at no cost. Our programs include support groups, healthy lifestyle classes, social activities, and educational programs such as this one. If you would like to learn more about our services or watch past webinars, please visit our website at cancersupportla.org. Before I introduce today's speakers, please note that your video and microphone are automatically disabled for this webinar. Please enter questions for the speaker into the Q&A feature found at the bottom of the Zoom window. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. We may not be able to get to all of your questions today, but we will get to as many as possible. Please use the chat feature to share comments and resources with other participants or to ask questions of CSCLA. We ask you to limit chat comments to information relevant to this topic. Mihiri Tillakaratne is a thyroid cancer survivor. She has a PhD in ethnic studies in gender and sexuality from UC Berkeley. She wrote a chapter on being a bad Buddhist auntie for the upcoming anthology Emergent Dharma, Asian American Feminist Buddhists on practice, identity, and resistance. She was an associate editor at Lion's Roar, where she developed content by, for, and about Asian American Buddhists. She enjoys her 2 cats, mixology experiments, watching period murder mysteries, and Excel spreadsheets. Mihiri is a young adult cancer survivor. Julia Leavitt is a licensed clinical social worker with over a decade of experience providing therapy and psychosocial support to individuals and families. She has had the privilege of working at leading cancer institutes on both the East and West Coast, where she supported children, young adults, and families facing a cancer diagnosis. Now in private practice, Julia's work centers on helping young adults and adults navigate life transitions, identity shifts, and the emotional challenges that accompany change. Her approach is warm, collaborative, and grounded in the belief that meaningful growth happens through authentic connection. Kathy Riley is Associate Director of Programs at Cancer Support Community Los Angeles. She earned a Master of Science in Public Health from California State University, Northridge, and is a graduate of the Master of Science in Narrative Medicine program in the Keck School of Medicine at USC. Riley brings her expertise in narrative medicine and public health to her work in cancer survivorship, program planning, and family-centered care. She is the mother of Peter, a long-term pediatric brain tumor survivor. It gives me a pleasure to welcome today's speakers, Kathy, Mihiri, and Julia.
Thank you, Abby, so much for that kind introduction. And I am so thrilled to be doing this webinar with my colleagues, Julia and Mihiri. Abby, I'm noticing that someone is saying our chat is disabled. So if you could check into that in the background, that would be terrific. And we have a lot of material to cover. So with that, oh, someone is saying test. So thank you. So it's working. Terrific. Thank you so much. All right. With that, why don't we go ahead and get our slides up and we'll get going with our material. All right, terrific. So we're really excited to have all of you here today. And as I thought about this webinar, I was reminded that each of you are on a path that is unique to you. And that's important to remember. You bring your own story to your cancer journey, and you are the best expert on you. Our hope is that each of you will find something today that's going to help you on your personal journey. Next slide. Here are our presenters again, and we can go on to the next slide. So we have nothing to disclose, and then we can move on to our mission. So the mission of cancer support community uplifts and strengthens people impacted by cancer by providing support, fostering compassionate communities, breaking down barriers to care, and we'll be sharing ways that you can get connected to Cancer Support Community Los Angeles, as well as a few other local resources in the community. And the next slide has our agenda for our time together today. We'll review our workshop objectives. We'll discuss common challenges with practical matters. We'll review how cancer impacts education and employment, provide tips to support your mental health, talk about navigating education and navigating employment, look at moving forward in education and employment, and provide resources that are both national and local resources. So let's take a look at our objectives for today. So the first objective is to help young adults impacted by cancer navigate transitions in education and employment. And the second is to help young adults impacted by cancer to build confidence, access resources, and connect with other young adults facing similar challenges. And our next slide. So I'll say that these next few slides are going to set the stage for everything we'll talk about today, and they'll provide some context for why the topic of education and employment is so crucial for young adults. So part of that is just looking at the statistic on the left. 84,100 adolescents and young adults between the ages of 15 to 39 will be diagnosed with cancer in the United States in 2024. And this accounts for about 4.2% of all cancer diagnoses. And to provide some context for this statistic on the right, Cancer Support Community Los Angeles is part of a larger network of cancer support communities with a national headquarters. And that headquarters administers what is called the Cancer Experience Registry, which is an online research study where patients and survivors and caregivers can share their experiences with cancer through a survey. And the data collected from this survey is used to understand the emotional, physical, financial, and practical impact of cancer with the hope of improving support services for people affected by cancer. So that was a lot of information I just said. But that helps provide some background for this statistic that you're seeing on the right, that 35% of patients who were surveyed in CSC's Cancer Experience Registry reported that they are moderately to very concerned about changes related to work and school. And then the next slide. So here is a list of some examples of common young adult shared experiences. And these experiences can be impacted by a cancer diagnosis. And there are things like applying to jobs, dating, moving out of a parent or guardian's home. But these experiences may also represent special achievements and take on greater value than they would have otherwise. And then the next slide. There can also be challenges with practical matters, like finding the right doctor, scheduling doctor's appointments or treatments, managing your health insurance, finding financial assistance to help with expenses, and then the focus of today's talk, which is navigating education and employment. And with that, I'm going to pass things off to Julia to take us through the next group of slides.
Thank you, Kathy. I really want to piggyback on how Kathy shared that this is everyone's unique experience. And so please keep that in mind as we're going over this presentation, and that it is a unique journey for all individuals, how they approach school and higher education and the workforce. So we're here to provide some tips and all information, but to please keep that in the back of our minds while we're talking today. So how cancer impacts education and employment, it is definitely a huge challenge. And it can be significant in what you're facing in your journey. A lot of change taking place. It's a time for change in our lives generally as young adults, but knowing that you might be forced to put a lot of goals on hold. You might have taken a gap year and be traveling Europe and decided, I don't want to go back to a traditional university. I now want to go to culinary school. Or you were up for a promotion and working 80 hours a week so that your managers would see, and now that promotion is put on pause and how you're thinking about your career changes. Or having to leave school altogether to tend to your medical needs and go to treatment, what that feels like, and putting a pause on that. Abby, next slide, please. So we're going to talk more in this section about the next two more forward. One more. Thank you. So cancer impacts education and employment. I was just talking about how it could interrupt your school plans and have you to, place pause, which then could lead to this idea of, oh my goodness, I have these gaps on my resume, or I'm applying to school and why does it say that it took me 5 years to complete high school? Or I was doing a program to get to my master's level of education, and that was delayed. And all of that adds to the physical and mental impacts that will be happening at that time. It forces you to change your relationships with your peers. If you were, let's say, in your third year of schooling in a 4-year program, whether it's high school or university, and you now have to take a pause from school to be in treatment, your peers are going to go on to graduate probably before you and facing that as well. If you are someone who works on teams and is with your coworkers all the time, that provides a lot of enjoyment, having that stimulation from others. And that's going to be taken and paused. And so it's going to change how you work with these people in the future and in the present. And then often we find that there's this change in priorities that is very common and takes place. Maybe the meaningful job you had pre-cancer doesn't connect with you anymore. Or maybe what you thought in the schools you were looking to go to, or the program you were in, the major you had, no longer resonates based on this experience. Next slide, please. So this is a wonderful TED Talk, but it's a little lengthy. So we encourage all of you to follow Sarah Dunley. She was a young adult diagnosed with breast cancer, or is a young adult and cancer thriver, who really found meaning in her job as a lawyer. And she speaks in her TED Talk about how she was able to use that to really focus on work and keep her going. But she also does an amazing job of talking about what she needed to do to get the accommodations to set her up for success while also going through treatment as a young adult. And she makes like a little joke in the beginning as a lawyer when she gets these results from the doctor that her biopsy was positive. She goes right into lawyer mode, and it's like, well, I need evidence, I need facts, I need to see all of this. And so we really encourage you to take some time and follow Sarah. She's a wonderful advocate for the young adult community. Next slide, please. So how cancer impacts education and employment, like we said, is going to be different for everyone. Young adults who are living with cancer while navigating education and or employment might be thinking about the following of helping them to do all of this. How important it is to set boundaries for your mental health. So knowing what your limits are, thinking about your pre-cancer self and how you navigated having tests or speaking to professors or teachers if something felt hard, or how you communicated to your boss. Those are all things to help protect your mental health and have those boundaries. Knowing, that maybe full-time coursework or employment isn't going to work, that's also a boundary, and then leads to being able to ask for those accommodations. And we're going to go more into what your rights are, but learning that it's okay to ask for assistance. So if you were someone who took the max course load every semester, maybe that's not feasible with also having to go to treatment or recovering from treatment, and you need to become a part-time student. And what does that mean? Or is there the possibilities of working a hybrid role for your employer so that you don't have to drive to the office every day? Addressing gaps in your resume or transcript. How do you do that? And the importance is to really be able to communicate all of this. And then, of course, accessing the available resources to you, whether it's in your own network, finding a new network of support, what schools provide in terms of counseling services and resources, and counseling around careers and education. And 7% of this national patient population that's been surveyed reported that not being able to get time off from work was a barrier to accessing cancer care. And so we will continue to go on and talk about how we don't want that to be a barrier and what can be done to support that your health is the #1 priority, but you're still getting to live your goals and dreams of attending school or being in the workforce. Next slide, please. I'm going to hand this over to Mihiri to do a little check-in.
Thank you, Julia. So yeah, just checking in on like how we feel about navigating education and employment. Like Julia was saying, there's so many factors that can come up when we're thinking about how we handle education and employment. It can be very, very scary. And so it's important to figure out, you know, what our fears are and maybe how to handle those fears. So for me, I know that in terms of the stressors and concerns that I've had and that I've heard other young adults have about managing work and school as a young adult living with cancer or a cancer survivor, one big thing for me is like grieving the body that I used to have, like having a changing relationship with my body. And what I mean by that is, um, and I hear this a lot in the cancer support community, Los Angeles young adult group, which I attend regularly. And we talk a lot about, okay, well, my resume says I have all of these abilities, I have all these skills, but does that match with what my current body can do? Like, can I do work full time? Can I do a full course load? Um, well, can I go in person to school or to work if I'm compromised or immunosuppressed? Do I only look at remote work when I'm searching for a job? And like, does this require a career shift or a shift in thinking about how, um, like what types of jobs that I can do? Um, so some things that I have and that I've heard other folks, especially in the young adult group, is like having a shorter attention span, right? In my case, like reach my saturation point sooner in terms of fatigue. Some people have brain fog, which makes it difficult for them to like think on their feet. I know we had a question come in before the webinar about how to explain gaps in your resume without disclosing that you've had cancer. And that's definitely a question that I've had as well. And something that was really helpful for me was I went to the USC Young Adult programs. They had a retreat. And at the retreat, they had a workshop on cancer and careers. And that was one of the questions that I asked too. So I have the same questions. And the participants were really, really wonderful in answering those questions. So one person works at a hospital here in Southern California. Another person was a recruiter for a biotech company. And they both said that nowadays, in this economy, people do have large gaps in their resume. So most of the time you don't have to really explain. And depending on the type of job that you apply for, one person at the workshop worked for the city of Los Angeles. And if you are applying for a job in like public life, in public service, in the government, local, city, state government, um, they legally cannot ask you about those gaps in your resume. And if you do start to explain why you had, if you had like medical issues, they would stop you and be like, no, we can't take that into consideration. So like, stop telling us about it. Um, Another thing that the recruiter mentioned was without disclosing, you can say that you were dealing with a family medical issue that has since been resolved. So it's general enough that, you had to take time, you had to take an extended time off, and it explains that gap. Another thing that some of the people who were hiring were saying, especially those that were in like medical fields, um, were that, if we hear that you had cancer and that you survived cancer, that's amazing to us. That's actually a strength because we know that you have been through it and you have come out the other side, that you have experienced things as a young adult that, the vast majority of young adults do not experience. So that gives you a really special perspective and a point of view that we would want on our team. So I guess it depends on the type of job you're looking for, the type of company. It depends, but there are ways that you can explain those gaps without actually mentioning that you had cancer. And sometimes, again, you don't have to explain because the economy being what it is, a lot of people have those gaps and they don't have cancer. All right.
Those are great suggestions, and I think really helpful to ease anxiety. I'm just going to add a couple on to that a little, in the sense that I've often heard that some YAs will use like planned personal leave to emphasize that from 2023 to 2024 they were focusing on their personal health and family responsibilities and have returned with a lot of enthusiasm to return to the workforce, or using, like how you said, the family and medical leave, or taking a personal sabbatical to focus on themselves, and now have come back again, re-energized and things like that. So keeping it very vague, but we are living in a time where many people are going to have these gaps on their resumes. Yeah. Next slide, please. So with all of this, it's very common that having to pause our goals or be separated from a community that provides us livelihood, mental health will take an impact. And so how do you continue to navigate your mental health while also trying to navigate the pieces of continuing in your education or employment? And so as a first step, over communicate with your peers and colleagues what you need. Maybe you return to the academic setting and you have to tell your professor or teacher 4 times that you were out, or you're coming back to a course that you only got to be part of for 6 weeks, and some of that material is there but feels fuzzy. And so advocate what you need in that. And sometimes it's having to do a full scan of yourself and think like, okay, I haven't been in a classroom in a while, so is it better if I sit in the front or the back? Or, a lot of trial and error to figure out what's going to work best. Plan ahead to reduce that uncertainty and gain some control. This is a major time of transition, and when we are going through a transition, we don't always feel grounded, and there's a lot more uncertainty. So for an example, if you were someone that commuted to an office every day and you've taken a leave from work and you're now returning, do the test drive of what it's like to go to work during rush hour. Do you remember all the alternative routes? Do you remember the parking system? Do that the week before you're set up to return to work. That's planning ahead. Or simple things like knowing, okay, I have to take medication at certain times during the day, so it's really important that I have snacks at work. Like I used to always go and make fun of the people that had snacks, but now it's important that I know where my own snack drawer is. And so go shopping and do that. Maybe perhaps through all of this, you're finding new ways to manage your stress, whether it's you've taken up meditation or yoga, or you've been making playlists to listen to at times that feel really anxious and overwhelming. Make new ones for this transition back to work, or while you're in school. I always love to say when we're feeling anxious or something feels fearful or there's uncertainty, embrace that with some curiosity. So what might it be exciting you about this time? What are you looking forward to? What do you need to learn? From that process, has new questions popped up that you need to go back and ask to your support system or the person in the accommodation office? Check in with yourself and loved ones to remind people that maybe you might not be as available anymore because you're back in school or you have a lot going on, or it'd be really great if someone could help you with meal prep because on Tuesdays you aren't going to be at work because you're going to be getting chemo. And so it's just going to be too overwhelming to get all of those things done. Always celebrate the small wins. Like that's the best thing any of us can do for ourselves. So even if it's like the first step was redoing your resume, and you take a few more weeks before you start sending it out, that's a huge win. Search for the mental health support that might be available and free to you if you're in a school setting, the counseling department, and then many employers offer EAP services, so that you just have that backbone knowing that this is a time of change and transition and things might come up for you. And, seeking professional help. So whether that's having a one-on-one with the HR department when you return to work, maybe you never knew some of the policies because it wasn't in the top of your mind or needed. So making sure that they're hearing what you're entitled to, what you need, and making yourself known that way. Thank you.
Julia, I love what you said about embracing uncertainty with curiosity. I hadn't heard that before. I think that will be one of my takeaways from this session. That was such a great tip. So let's dive a little deeper into the educational piece. Next slide. So navigating your role as a student while also being a young adult with cancer can be complex and challenging. However, with the right strategies and support, it is possible to successfully balance achieving your educational goals and managing your health. So, what are those strategies and supports that could make it possible to achieve your educational goals and manage your health? And again, we've been saying your journey is yours. It is unique to you. And so some of the strategies on this, and we can go to the next slide, Abby. Some of these strategies may or may not work for you, and it may not be something you've experienced. But here is a sampling of some of those strategies. Avoid comparison, a really hard thing to do. Students often move through educational programs in groups. And so peers that you started with in your program may have progressed to the next educational stage. And then if cancer got in the way of your academic progress, you may have remained stagnant in your journey. So that can be really disappointing. It can be frustrating that your peers continue to progress while you have not. And it can be easy then to fall into comparison, but remember that you have grown and progressed too in different ways. Prioritize your health. Remember that as a young adult living with cancer in your life, your health is the top priority. And while academic success is important, that your well-being comes first. We've talked a lot about seeking guidance, seeking professional help. Don't hesitate to seek guidance and support from counselors, medical professionals, and cancer support organizations to ensure that smooth and successful navigation of a student life. Ask for accommodations. Use your resources. Many academic institutions have policies and regulations around accommodations. And some schools also have student advocates who can speak on your behalf when it comes to communicating with professors or other academic staff about your medical needs. And then let's go on to this next slide. So this slide is quite busy with information, and it is a policy spotlight. There are many laws and regulations that can support you in navigating education and cancer at the same time. These are the top three. The first one is the Individuals with Disabilities Act. The second is Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. That can help with schooling. You can use that to have some accommodations in college. The third is the Americans with Disabilities Act. And all of these prevent discrimination, give you rights. And so we're not going to go into them in great detail, but want to just put a spotlight on these three so that if you want to dig into them and take a further look, you can. And then with that, and these are federal laws, so they govern individuals no matter where you live in the United States. And with that, Julia, I'll pass things off to you again.
Thank you. So now we'll shift back to talking more specifically about employment and what is available for access. Sorry, Abby, if you wouldn't mind moving the slides forward. And to the next one as well. So it can be very challenging to think about, how do I talk about cancer in the workplace? What do I want people to know if I want to say anything? And the key to feeling more confident and having success in this is being able to communicate what your needs are. And like we talked about, there being a spectrum of how everyone here today views work and school and their experience. Some people will leave their work. Some people will continue to work. And so being able to decide and speak with your medical team what's best for you, even speaking to them about when the transition to return to work might be, or what, how you might be feeling. Will, treatment be over at this date if I'm thinking I want to start sending out resume and cover letters? And so those are all things to keep in mind as you start to communicate. Next slide, please. So these are top things that probably come to mind when we are thinking about, how am I going to navigate this employment, the idea of working and treatment or post-treatment. So we spoke a little bit about addressing these cover letter gaps and how you do that. And everyone's different, and it's always helpful to run that by someone or think about it. And maybe you decide you're going to write personal sabbatical and you sit with that for a few days, and then you go back to your resume and you're like, I want to change that to plan personal leave. One thing that can be really helpful is to expand on your soft skills. So what are we talking about? Using words like empathetic, good communicator. So I left for a planned sabbatical and I came back with a new vision of a new way of feeling empathetic towards my colleagues and things like that. So really highlighting, even if you are addressing the gap, what some of those soft skills are, or putting that throughout your resume at other times where you worked. What accommodations do you need? So thinking, the idea of working 40 plus hours a week isn't going to work for me anymore. So what do I propose to my HR department, my manager, my boss? Is it possible for temporary part-time hours, like flexible work schedules, knowing if you see your oncologist every other Thursday, is it possible for that to be a day that you can work from home, or that you ask that there are no scheduled meetings, knowing that your work day will be interrupted for those appointments? What are the flexible time off policies? How do you find out about them? So whether it's a manual online, going directly to your manager, again, I had mentioned before, speaking with HR, maybe you come back to a job that no longer is something that you feel capable of doing. If it was a job where you had to be on your feet for the entire day, and now you're still faced with some fatigue, or you've had surgeries that have required that is just not feasible. So how can you shift some of your job responsibilities? Or maybe you were managing several teams, and as you think about your transition back to work or why you're on treatment, maybe you give up some of that work for a little while so that you feel like you still have the control and can maintain what your job responsibilities are. No matter what, you're always going to make your health your number one priority. So that comes first. And so when thinking about what you'll need to get through your day or your week at work, also remembering that that might mean taking time off for doctor's appointments or knowing that things just don't operate the way they used to. So do you need to ask for a different kind of computer setup? If you were the person that used to take notes in the monthly staff meeting, maybe that's not the best job for you right now to set you up for success. So again, asking for those accommodations and to seek guidance. So always starting with human resources, then seeking out legal professionals, and then we're going to name some wonderful organizations that exist just for the cancer population. Next slide, please. So this again is a very full slide, like Kathy had mentioned in terms of education, but I think it's important to remember that there is protection even in the workforce. So this policy spotlight is going to, again, the American with Disabilities Act, there are federal laws that will prohibit you from facing any kind of discrimination in the workforce. So whether that means asking now for a better work setup to accommodate your physical limitations, all of those things. FMLA, the Family Medical Leave Act, does provide long-term job protection, and some people are eligible for that. I've also heard of people finding when they do return to work using intermittent family leave, if that's available to them, something to look into so that you never feel like you have to use PTO to go to the doctors or address any of your medical needs. And then lastly, the Genetic Information for Non-Discrimination Act, which I think is really important to remember that it prohibits employers from using an individual's genetic information, including information about predisposition to cancer employment, on their decisions. So no one can know that. So again, this is just a reminder that there are federal laws to support your return or your maintaining your employment. Next slide, please. Okay. Oh, and I'm turning that over now to Kathy.
So what are some practical ways that you can move forward in education and employment? And we'll talk for a minute about asking for accommodations. So this is a long list. And as I was reading through it, trying to think about how we do this, maybe take one of these, take it a piece at a time. It doesn't all have to be done in one sitting in 1 week, but these are some practical ways that you can prepare for asking for accommodations. So, and asking for accommodations in both work and school can be an essential part of helping to ensure that you can perform your best while prioritizing and managing your health needs. So the first one is simply identifying your needs. What are those specific accommodations that might be helpful to you? It might be extended deadlines for assignments or projects. It might be a flexible work or school hours to accommodate medical appointments or treatment. And Julia just talked about that. Gathering documentation is also an important step. Collecting the medical records you need from your healthcare team, records that outline your diagnosis or your post-treatment care plan or any related limitations or recommendation that can support your request for an accommodation. And again, understanding your rights. We've had those couple of spotlights of those federal laws, and familiarizing yourself with those things, that those laws that do protect you. And it's important to understand that you do have rights. And then contact the right person. In school, reach out to the office responsible for disability services or accommodations. It could be the Office of Disability Services, or perhaps it's a designated counselor. In the workplace, you can contact your human resources department or your supervisor to discuss your needs. Communicating clearly then is so crucial. Schedule a meeting or start a conversation to discuss your needs and accommodation. Be clear and concise when explaining your situation about the specific accommodation you're asking for. You might want to write out that conversation before you have it so that you really cover everything you want to cover during that conversation. And then following up, work collaboratively with the relevant personnel. They're on your team. And after the accommodation is granted, continue to keep that open communication with your school or with your workplace. And just remember that self-advocating for accommodations is a reasonable and a protected right for you. And by clearly communicating your needs and working with the authorities at your school or at your workplace can really create this environment that supports your well-being and allows you to thrive in an environment, whether that's the school environment or the work environment. And I'm going to pass things off to Julia.
Thank you. So I touched on this briefly a bit earlier, that it is very common that relationships will change throughout this time. Your relationships with your friends, because they're continuing to go on in school and maybe move up in a grade level or finish an academic program. And so or that they are talking about promotions or applying for new jobs when things for you right now might be put on pause or look a little differently. You might find it harder to connect with coworkers that you sit and have lunch with every day, that maybe you guys just talk about the everyday things that might be their challenges when they might not fully understand the scope of everything you're facing in that moment. And talking about, like I mentioned, classmates. If you had classmates that you were in study groups with and now you're not attending them as regularly, maybe you're not seeing them as often. And so it's important to also embrace new ways of support, but also communicate how you want to receive support. So for example, if you're part of a group of coworkers that went out to a new restaurant once a month or a happy hour, do you still want to be included in that, even if you're not seeing them on an everyday basis? You let them know, like, I would still love to hear when we're trying that new Thai restaurant that we've always talked about trying by the office, and I'll try to be there if I get some heads up notice. So really putting it out there to manage these expectations that you don't later see it on social media, that your whole team went out to dinner, and it may have just been that they made these plans during the workday and you weren't there. So really sharing how you want to hear, and be part of these communities that you were a part of prior to having treatment and your cancer diagnosis. And I think the biggest thing to always remember is that we're not all mind readers. So really being able to put out how you want to seek support and then turning to new support. So whether that's attending the cancer support group, maybe you've met friends in the hospital that are also or when you're getting chemo, who are also experiencing these similar pauses, and that being able to sit and talk about that and validate that with someone who's going through it. Next slide, please. Oh, and I'm going to turn it back over for our next check-in. Yeah.
Next slide, please.
Next slide.
Perfect. Hi, back again. So let's check in and talk about how you ask for support in education and employment. I'm going to speak a little bit more about support in education because that's kind of where my experience mostly lies. I taught at UCLA and UC Berkeley for a decade. So I have a lot of experience from the other side of this as an instructor who is receiving accommodation requests. So first thing is super normal. It is super, super normal to ask for accommodations. And you do that through, as Kathy was saying, through the Office for Students with Disabilities, or whatever it may be called at university. From my end, as an instructor, I get an email from that office at the beginning of the quarter or the semester. And actually, you can ask for accommodations you need at any point within the term, and then I'll get an email at that point, maybe 6 weeks in. But all I do is I get an email about what your accommodation is. I don't know what your diagnosis is, unless you come up to me and tell me I have ADHD or I have cancer. All I know is that, for example, an example of accommodation would be, this person needs 1.5 time for in-class essays. So if I had an in-class essay that was 60 minutes, this person would need 90 minutes, and that's all I know. So some other accommodations that people, actual students, have asked for, and when I say asked for, they're not asking the professor for permission. They're saying, these are my accommodations, and this is what I need to succeed in this course. So some of these accommodations that I've had students in the past have are a dedicated note taker who comes to all of the lectures. So this person sits and types up notes for the student. Again, if they have brain fog, if they have difficulty with attention, the ability to bring a recording device is another accommodation. And that depends on the class, really. Another accommodation is accessing materials in a different format or submitting class materials in a different way. This is from my time in college, but I had a classmate who had vision issues and so needed to access our PDFs in like a different format that would work with his screen reader. And like I said, extra time for exams and extra time for timed assignments. Um, Something that I could see, an assignment that I've done in the past is I've had students do short videos or podcasts, but I know that some people after chemo have like tinnitus or other hearing issues. So I could easily adapt that assignment for the person if needed, if the student went and asked me. Um, Another important thing is to go to office hours and talk to your professors, talk to your instructors, your teaching assistants. Oh, and something that I need to mention, just go back a little bit, that email that we get with what accommodations that you have also go to your teaching assistants. So the whole teaching team for your courses will know that you need certain accommodations that you need. But again, going to office hours is having that face-to-face time is very humanizing. Um, like the most students I ever had at any one time were about 90. And I made it a point to like know everybody's like names and faces by like week 3 at least. But my mom, who was a professor at UCLA, I taught the social sciences, so like relatively smaller classes. She taught in the life sciences, biology, and her classes were huge, hundreds of students. So of course she'd go like an entire quarter and like not even know what certain students' faces look like because, they didn't come see her. But yeah, going to office hours, talking to them if you wish to disclose, if you don't wish to disclose, right? If you want to explain, like that's up to you. But I highly recommend, whether or not you disclose your cancer status, going and speaking to your professors and teaching assistants one-on-one. Um, and if you do have to take time for medical appointments and you have to miss lectures, make a friend in class. It's always good to make friends anyway, but make a friend in class who will share your notes with you. I still remember I fell down some stairs in undergrad, and so I missed some classes because I just could not walk. Um, and I still remember the person who shared their notes with me. And it's been 18 years, and I still remember her very, very fondly. But yeah, the people are really kind. People are very, very kind, and they will help you out. Um, Speaking of falling down the stairs and mobility issues. Something that's also really important is seeing, and I only have experiences with UC campuses um, in this matter, but most campuses have some sort of disability shuttle, or at the very least a golf cart. And sometimes there's an app, sometimes there's a phone number that you can call. So if you have um difficulty, if you have like mobility difficulties, you can access that disability shuttle at any time. Especially sometimes you have classes that are at one end of campus, and then you have another class that starts in 5 minutes from the other end of campus. So using that, and again, telling your professors if you have issues with mobility, that you do have issues with mobility and that you will be late to their class. I once missed a half an hour of a final exam because the disability shuttle broke down. And once I got into the exam room, I told the professor about that and she gave me that extra time, um, which was very kind. It really, ultimately, it comes down to communicating your needs, whether or not you disclose, communicating what your needs are, um, and people will understand. People are, the vast majority of people um, I have spoken to, the students I've spoken to have been, um, their accommodations have been accommodated. Um, Another thing, if you're a student, if you don't have a therapist, going to the walk-in, I always encourage all of my students, regardless of their health status, to go to the walk-in mental health clinics, and speak to someone. It can, you know, University is very overwhelming, and it's very useful to talk out your feelings with someone. Um, oh, and there's also like peer counseling as well, and talking to peers about your issues can be very important. And finally, like, start a student group. There's so many student groups. I love, the beginning of the semester, the quarter, and walking down Bruin Plaza or Sproul Plaza and seeing all of the undergrads with their little booths set up. Start a, young adults with cancer support group. Just, you don't even have to be like a support group. You can just like go out for Thai food once a week. And that would be a really great way of creating community. And you can share your stories and also share resources. Um, and yeah, I think there's it can be really daunting to be in university just by itself, but then having cancer is like another stressor on top of that. But trust me, there are plenty of accommodations and plenty of people who are there to help you, and who will be there for you when you need it.
Thank you. All such important tips and tools that can also be carried on, I think, into the workforce. I really, the takeaway from that is just communicating and advocating for yourself. So if you were someone that is experiencing some brain fog and you're back in work, maybe you have to keep Post-its around your desk because you don't even remember how your company operates in sending out the memo or what needs to be included. And so having those guides to really set you up for success are things that I've heard from young adults as they transition back to work. Maybe it's not like your direct manager that you feel very connected to. And so you go to the manager above that person to share, like, this is what I need, and I need these supports. And can you help me to access these accommodations so I can continue to work on this team or here? I'm going to go to the next slide and I'm going to go through that one quickly because we do have the slides will be available to everyone, and just in looking at what time it is, we still have a bit to get through. So as we've all talked about today, is that it's hard to be a young adult, whether you're dealing with cancer or not, and cancer added on top of that makes these challenges even harder. And so also being aware that it's okay to be looking for financial assistance. Maybe you had always dreamed of getting an MBA, but you knew you needed to work for a few years to have that financial cushion to do that. And then now you haven't been able to continue and work because of cancer treatment. And so there's this fear that, oh, I can't reach that goal. So really thinking of what you need and speaking to social workers at your hospital, financial coordinators in the institutions, and what are some other non-monetary forms of assistance? So letting people know you're going back to school or you're transitioning back to work, and can they help you with meals? Or if you did leave and you had a group of you know, students that you were close with and they've now moved on, maybe they have some of the course material that you'll need for the year that they already completed. And so not having to buy books or other things like that. And then always feeling free to start a GoFundMe, and share your amazing story, that it's important to reach your goals. And sometimes you are faced with taking a pause and you still want to get back there. So that's some tips to look at. Abby, next slide, please. So we talked briefly, I mentioned earlier, about how do we move forward in education and employment with having this new set of resilience and advocacy. But for many, you want to change that career path, or you aren't so sure you want to go on to get a higher education degree. And a lot of times it's your cancer experience and journey has brought you to this place or this crossroads of, what do I want next for myself? And how do I find purpose in going to school all day, or sitting in a cubicle doing work, or in an office? And so really examining and thinking about, what are the new things that are really important to me? Or, and Abby, you can put up the next slide because I'm going to combine these. Or thinking about maybe like my priorities have changed, and I'd rather be in a position where I can spend more time with my friends and family. And so I want to find a job that allows that. Or the thing that got me through treatment was I daydreamed about getting to see all these cities and countries I've never been to. So I now realize that if I found a job that one of the requirements was to travel, that's something that sounds appealing when maybe it used to not sound appealing. Maybe you were really inspired by the physical therapist you had for the 9 months of treatment, and you decide to ask them, what were the steps you took to becoming a physical therapist? And, or maybe you want to directly provide patient advocacy or and for other young adults with cancer, and exploring what ways could that become a full-time position for you. Or you start to really expand your spiritual and religious practices. And so what does that mean in terms of being able to manage both work and school? Do you start to join a community that's, allows you to have that practice as well? So all things to think about as you move forward, cultivating what your purpose is. And there's no right or wrong answer to this in finding purpose. Or maybe you work for a large company that actually has a volunteer leg, and they are always looking for employees. A lot of corporate jobs have that, to set up volunteer booths and go out and do good. And maybe that's something you want to take on and be more involved in. So all things to think about. Next slide. I think this is our last check-in.
Yeah. How do we cultivate purpose? How do we use what this experience has given us to move forward, both within ourselves and connecting with others? For me, and I think for a lot of young adults, like, cancer is a very isolating experience. And like I mentioned earlier, you're grieving the body that you used to have. Something we talk about a lot about in the CSCLA young adult support group is this idea of post-traumatic growth, and the way it's sort of manifested in me, right? Growth that has come out of trauma. Um, so I'm an introvert, very much so. And I like staying at home, curled up on the couch with my cats. And I still do that, but I've discovered that I'm saying no less, meaning that I'm exploring doing more things with people, and I'm connecting with more people and asking them to do things with me. So that is spending more time with people I love, going on little trips. And now that my body has changed, last year I went with my writing group to a cabin in the woods. This year I did the same thing, except I was using a cane when we went on our little hikes. right? If, you do have mobility issues or fatigue issues, maybe instead of going out with friends, you have nights in. Movie nights is something my friends and I like to do, and we're really big on game nights. So still connecting with those people, but in a way that makes more sense to you and your body. Something else that I did is for my cancerversary, or the day that I was diagnosed with cancer, I got a tattoo. I don't know if you can see it. It's a butterfly. Oh, wait. It's a butterfly because a butterfly is shaped like a thyroid. Um, so this is about my one of my dissertation chapters was about how we use our body as archive, and how we use our body to store memories, and how our body stores memories whether we like it or not. So kind of taking an active approach to be like, yes, I don't have a thyroid anymore. Yes, I have the scar, but I am turning my body into a piece of art to commemorate this journey, my 1 year into this journey. And that was very healing for me. Um, and I found myself, as someone who wears skirts and dresses, I'm wearing shorts more because I want to show off my tattoo because it's on my thigh. So it's changed my fashion. So it's been really lovely to see myself grow in a way that I never expected to. Um, and meeting people that I would have never met. So other young adult support groups and activities. I've made so many friendships with the CSCLA Young Adult Support Group. And I had a really great time at the USC Young Adult Retreat in September. And it was lovely to talk to so many different types of people about so many different types of things, some of which had nothing to do with cancer. And some people I still don't know what type of cancer they had. And other people, they just whipped out their phone and were like, do you want to see an MRI of my brain tumor? Right? And it was so lovely to see how everybody handles this journey differently, and to see like people's different approaches to life. Um, Despite the fact that we're all, young adults with cancer. Um, I feel that I have grown more as a person, strangely enough. And that required me being more vulnerable, communicating my needs to the people who love me, and kind of stepping a little bit outside of my comfort zone. Because having cancer was way outside of my comfort zone. So I was like, you know what, as an introvert, I can afford to like, do things that I've never really done before. Um, and yeah, I just get a whole new perspective on life that way. Because like cancer sucks. It sucks so much, but I have, in the past year and a half, the people I've met and the personal growth I've gone through has been amazing, and I don't think I would change it for anything. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mihiri. You have really demonstrated and given such great examples for this next slide, which is all about community and building community. And whether that is with a new friend, I think you said going for Thai food, start that way, start small, to when you're ready, joining a support group. The power of community is so important. And then Abby, our next slide. So these next several slides, we're going to go through quickly just to show you the resources that are available to you. And we are happy to provide a copy of these slides if you email us at info@cancersupportla.org, because I think it's about the next 9 slides that have some excellent resources that you may want. So this is young adult cancer advocacy organizations. And then the next slide, more cancer advocacy organizations. Next slide. So community is stronger than cancer. And I love that statement. So as you navigate education and employment as a young adult, remember that there are support services available to you in your workplace, at school, in the organizations here at Cancer Support Community. Next slide. These are some local resources if you're interested in joining a support group with Cancer Support Community in Los Angeles. There is our website. You can get started on our website, or you can email us at info@cancersupportla.org. Mihiri mentioned the Adolescent and Young Adult Program at USC. There's also Teen Cancer America. And then for those of you with questions about your legal rights, you can go to the Disability Rights Legal Center. And next slide. Some more CSC resources that you can get access to by using this QR code. Next slide, Abby. This is a cancer support helpline that has excellent resources. There are resource navigators and social workers that are operating this cancer support community helpline, and the number is on your screen. Next slide. This is the Cancer Experience Registry that we talked about earlier. That's that survey that's used in research, and you can contribute to this research by filling out the survey. Next slide. You can also join a grassroots community effort with some work on Capitol Hill that the Cancer Support Community National Office is doing. And next slide. Some more resources from the Cancer Support Community Headquarters. And then next slide. All right, Q&A. I think we can take maybe just a minute or two. There's a couple of questions, and then we'll finish up here in just a couple of minutes. And I'm gonna, if Julia and Mihiri, if you want to both unmute, and I'll just put this out to the group. I'm not legally required to disclose that I have a disability when applying for a job or school, correct?
I don't know about the legalities. I would say when applying for school, I would mention it in your application. And then there was another question about grad school as well. And I'll just repeat what I said there, that it speaks to your resilience as a person. It humanizes you, because people are reading so many applications. And if you can show that there's like a particular reason for a gap in your schooling, a dip in your GPA for a particular semester, or if you have like really great scores all about like and really great recommendation letters, and yet you've had cancer, it just shows again your resilience and your strength as a person. Um, um, and the question, I don't know if you all can see the questions, but the question that I answered in the chat was specifically on cancer research. And again, there are a lot of people in cancer research, some of which I know personally, who are there because they've either had cancer or their family members have cancer. And it shows that you have a clear desire and investment in the work itself. So it's definitely a strength. So I would recommend mentioning it on your school applications.
And it's also a place that if you were to, because I have seen on job applications where it's you're clicking a button to say I'm disabled, and there's no room to express what that means. And that's also such a spectrum that using your cover letter to explain why you selected that box, or if there is a question in the actual application about how have you handled challenge or something, many times they're looking for what your character is. That would be another place to talk about what it means for you to view yourself as disabled.
Great. Well, thank you both so much. Any other closing thoughts from either one of you? This has been such a rich conversation. We've covered so much material, so please reach out to us at info@cancersupportla.org to get a copy of these slides so you can walk through it again. Anything else, Mihiri or Julia?
Thank you. Everybody who asked questions. Thank you, everyone who is participating in this webinar. Yeah, I hope to see you at more CSCLA events.
Terrific. Well, thank you everyone for your great questions, for your wonderful attention. And our final slide is a QR code for an evaluation. And we invite you to complete this evaluation. It's from our headquarters, and it really sort of helps them develop programming fuller and in fuller and richer ways. And have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in this rich discussion, and we hope to see you at more webinars.